I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z Podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, former founder of Electric, and now the co-founder of Scaleless. And today I'm talking with Makoto Kern, who's the founder at IIIMPACT, which is a digital product design and development consulting agency that specializes in successfully launching software products. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So before we jump into things here, can you give everybody just a quick TLDR on your background and how you got into software to begin with?
Sure, definitely. I started way back when as an electrical and automation engineer out of school, did that for a while, and always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And, I've always tried to test different things, but, as an engineer back in the day, Craigslist was a thing. I was building websites and doing SEO and that sort of thing. But I was also helping redesign software applications in the manufacturing space for automation. And so I was kind of gravitated towards user experience design, which is what our bread and butter is for our agency. But I just started building people's websites, started finding clients on Craigslist, and I got to a point where I was able to quit my job as an engineer and just started my business full time. Was running that for the last almost 20 years now, and grown my business from a small agency to we had, I think at most about 50 people in our agency, and we've been helping enterprise software clients specifically, a lot in more of the complex spaces of cybersecurity, energy, robotics. I actually went full circle with my degree and some of my, my former businesses that I work with. But we've been primarily helping our clients if they have a software application that has become antiquated, and the tech stack has been, pretty much falling behind, and they need to redesign it to actually work better. And they're starting to lose competition to their competitors in the market space. We actually come in and really help them determine the best strategy, the best process, and the user experience design and the front end development for their products.
What are some of the biggest challenges that maybe legacy is the wrong term, but established tech companies face when it comes to things like tech debt and, trying to iterate and build on a product that's been there for 10, 15 years. And, you mentioned there's some newcomers that come onto the space and they don't have any tech debt. They're also starting from zero, but there's obviously been a lot that has changed in the last 10 to 15 years when it comes to even the languages used, the infrastructure to build. So what are some of the unique challenges that they would face versus somebody who's just starting that new?
For sure. I think what I always say is you have to have the 3 Ps to have a successful company, and that's product, people, and process. And when you see companies with legacy products, they tend to want to either try to bandage fix what they currently have, or they have to maintain what product they have because they have current clients. And so to build something brand new, you've got the challenges of having their team, just keeping the lights on, having that team's bandwidth be very limited to building something brand new. And then most of the time, they're very immature in their process of actually becoming feature-centric to user-centric. And to change that mindset is very different, because it's generally, you've got a lot of developers that are designing as well. And you got to have that separation, and to be user-centric focused, and to be not only user-centric focused, but have the scalability and kind of the roadmap thinking of how does this product fit into, the business goals, your users' goals, and the constraints of the development team. Those are like the main challenges we see when we go into clients, is that they're unable to understand all the different risks and the different challenges that they're faced when they're trying to redesign the application. And so what we try to do is identify those risks really quickly with the leadership, and then understand, okay, these are things that we know that you need to have in your new application, and these are things that are very risky and it's going to take a lot of effort. Let's get those in front of users and test them out in prototypes before you start building it.
And can you drill down a little bit more on feature-centric versus user-centric? Like, what does that look
Definitely.
like in practice?
So when it comes to user-centric, we try to get the leadership, development team, and the product teams to really think about what is the user's goals, their pain points, and what is their workflow throughout their, when they're doing their tasks. And when you get a lot of times you get leaders that really think about, well, if we have this feature, or if we have AI, boom, we're going to sell it. Everybody's going to want it. But what but what we're seeing, especially now with AI being such a big thing, is like we have to have AI and that's it. But they're not really thinking, is this just a chatbot? Is it something more? Can we actually implement what is necessary for a user to say, oh, that's something that's much different than what your competitor has, or this is much better, or I can perform my workflow in such a more efficient manner than this other application. So getting that mindset to change with leadership is so important, because they really just think, okay, it's like if you build it, they'll come. That's what they're thinking is always. And if we have these 10 features, we're gonna blow the competition out of the water. But I've seen time and time again that more nimble, smaller companies with less features tend to do better if their user interface and their user experience and the tech stack outperforms the other ones with even less features. So that's just a mindset that you've got to switch, especially when they come from a legacy system.
Yeah, to your point about being feature centric, there's so many solutions out there where you need specialists, you need like whole implementation teams, because of the fact that they're just so complicated and complex. And then you might see a newcomer come to market that might not even have all the bells and whistles that the industry incumbent has, but the industry incumbent, maybe only 25% of the product is actually even getting leveraged, because it is a little bit more cumbersome to use. And just throwing AI into something for the sake of having AI, I'm pretty sure every software company out there now, from the ones who've been around the 50 years to just getting started, there's AI in the product. And it's pretty obvious even at this point what companies are truly like AI centric and focused versus which ones are just trying to get it into the product so that they can say that they are an AI company.
Yeah, we actually are seeing that in real time right now with some of our clients, where we have ones that really don't involve us. They just said, oh, we're just moving resources over to implement this AI, whether it's just implementing Copilot or some type of chatbot, that they said, we've got this. But then we've got other clients that say, hey, we are implementing a very smart chatbot, but we want something that is not just all text heavy. You're just typing in things. We're actually helping with the prompts. We're helping out create more visual like responses that are much easier to just like narrow down choices. It's far easier to manage and to I guess to talk with the AI, and it just, you can see the differences in results and the outcomes just from those two interactions with involving us that are really user centric versus ones that just want the feature.
Yeah, and when I think the approach that I've tried to take is look at the user problems and then think about, is there a way that AI could make this better? Because that isn't always the case. AI isn't meant for every single component of your product, nor will it necessarily make it easier. It actually might make it more challenging. Whereas there have been other instances, for example, like one of the biggest issues with candidates applying to jobs is that they got to fill out all this basic information over and over and over again. But with AI now, they can just upload their resume once. It'll scrape everything in about 5 seconds, auto-generate all the structured data for them, and that saves the candidates, a tremendous amount of time. So that was an example where, at least hypothetically, we looked at the user problem, and then AI was what actually, was able to solve it in a way that you wouldn't have been able to in the past. So stuff like that is really cool. But then there are other instances where, like in the Shopify ecosystem, as an example, you have a lot of these email marketing platforms who are trying to get AI incorporated into the product, but a subject line, writer, cool, I guess, but great. That saved me, 2 seconds, maybe. That is a little bit more gimmicky per se, and it's sort of AI for the sake of AI. It's not transforming any component of the product or how the user is actually using it.
For sure. I mean, I'm sure you've seen where a new release by OpenAI just disrupts all these chat GPT wrappers, and gets them out of business because they didn't really think things through as far as like what problems are you trying to solve, and yeah, we're seeing that happen with, just with your applications right now with you know how many people are using Grammarly? Do you use that as much anymore? Probably not.
No.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it is interesting to see how some of the industry incumbents are like really transforming their platform with AI, and others that are not. And I really don't think there's a significant amount of time that we'll have to wait to see how this plays out. Maybe a couple of years. We're not talking 10, 15 years here, because things just move so quickly now. But with AI, what are the things that excites you the most, and how has that changed the way that you work with your clients, or even do things internally as an agency owner?
With AI, as far as how we leverage it more internally, we definitely, when it comes to design, you're going to see, with certain, I guess with websites, they all look the same now. There's definitely templated designs. They seem to work fine as it is until something changes. So you can have the tools that we use, they help you quickly create like, oh, I need a checkout. Checkout, we pretty much know what an e-commerce checkout looks like. There's some variations of things, but when it comes to that, you can pretty much have AI say, okay, generate a, add to cart, checkout, process your credit card, and then you're done. Those kind of things. That way you can focus on more of the harder problems to solve when it comes to workflow and the design, and you can really put more effort into that. User research as well. We've seen, it does definitely disseminate the data. So if we're collecting a lot of like audio, and we're collecting a lot of data points as far as like, how does this perform when we're doing a benchmark usability testing and trying to get feedback on that, or any type of card sorting where we're trying to determine a better navigation system. And the taxonomy is really complicated. And so AI is helping a little bit to understand that. We're seeing, you still have to be an expert to know what the right questions to ask and what the outcome is. But the efficiencies gained where one person can do a little bit more if they're an expert. I think it's like anything, where if you're average or subpar and you're trying to use AI, maybe you might do okay, or it may help you with certain things to help elevate your skill set. But if you're above average and you really know what you're doing and you leverage AI, you can accelerate the time-intensive tasks that normally waste your time, so you can focus on the really hard solves. But with clients, we're seeing, what I'm really excited about is the human element that we're seeing, especially near like customer service, I think is a big one that's being disrupted. And we're actually helping out with clients with that aspect of it, where, when you go through, depending on what type of customer service you have, the subject matter can be very complex. So you could go to an FAQ system, you can go to, you call somebody up and ask for questions, or you ask a chatbot to answer certain questions. But if you can really train like the AI agents and create specific ones for clients that know and understand their particular data, I can see, and we see the advantages of using AI for that, where you can actually utilize less human interaction and less training, and then use AI to actually help users that are new to an enterprise platform to understand how things work. So I think you're seeing a lot of acceleration there, because that's just something that you normally program, a customer service, somebody says this, almost a flow chart of how to get them from A to B. So, those are things that we're seeing in the immediate future. In the farther future, that one's hard to say, because it's, I'm seeing, like I said, a lot of companies are putting so much resources into just putting UI into their product, and how they implement that, I think I'm trying to understand where the ROI is. And so if it's going to cost them, whatever a number of resources to integrate that and maintain it, and to continuously check that to make sure it's keeping up to date. I think that's where we may see a switch where, maybe AI isn't the answer. Maybe it's a semi-automated type of thing where you've got people that are in there understanding how to do a specific task, but then they have a specific AI agent helping them out. So each company, whether it's a law firm, it's a robotics company, or whatever, energy company, you're creating very customized AI agents for these corporations versus just having, Copilot integrated into your system. So I think that's kind of where you probably are seeing things switch or going towards. But I assume things will get more and more efficient and cost effective for people to actually integrate that, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the costs continue to go down. I mean, like that parsing tool that I mentioned, we wouldn't have been able to do it even 9 months ago because the costs were too high, and also the accuracy of which it could, perform the task was not, it wasn't helpful, because you would still have to spend so much time, actually doing things manually. And so I think over time, it'll get easier and easier, and the barrier to entry will get lower and lower for businesses. But at the same time, some of these industry incumbents, like Shopify as an example, just because that's what I'm closest to, the amount of investment that would go into just trying to get all of the core, like, need to have feature sets into a platform, if somebody really did want to go after them. You mentioned checkout as an example. Everybody knows what it looks like and what it should do, but you still need it. And there's like 1,000 other things that you also still need in an e-com platform. And so do you think there will be more and more sort of companies that start to incubate internally, sort of partitioning off a portion of, their team or their resources to sort of spin up, net new product offerings, or try and get some of that, like, entrepreneurship mentality, but with the funding and sort of capabilities that a larger enterprise could provide?
I think that's what you should be doing. We always tend to be the innovation arm, or, the company that comes in and says, okay, we're going to develop something in a black box, and then we're going to present it to you, type of thing. So your main team can just continue, supporting the current product. Even though as a company, you should always continuously invest in innovation and continuous improvement. But many of them seem to be happy with just maintaining or the status quo because they see innovation, especially during a recessionary period, that tends to be cut first. And the companies that don't cut and continue to innovate and continuously improve, when the recession's over with, and they always tend not to last forever, they tend to be way ahead of any competition. And so, I think when we go into companies, we try to understand where the biggest risks are, because everybody tends to be risk adverse during recessionary periods, but you still want to innovate. Even maybe it's at a slower pace. Maybe you're not putting in you're trying to hit that, home run shot, but you're trying to at least slowly innovate constantly every month. I mean, look at SpaceX, look at Tesla. They've leapfrogged so many companies, because if you look at their number of revisions within a year, I mean, it's exponentially more. And so if you get companies to think it like that, and it has to come from the top down. That's why we always try to interface with the top down versus trying to make change from the bottom up. It's more effective, because you have to have the mindset where everybody's like, hey, let's try to figure out how to make this better, versus like, hey, what is this other competitor doing over here? We're not going to do anything unless I see it with 3 other competitors. And it's like, well, you're always playing catch up. So I think there should always be some type of budget to innovate, but companies are just, they're just tend not to do that.
Yeah, it's like proactive versus being reactive.
Yep. Correct.
And it's a lot easier to say you're proactive and want to be proactive than to, actually be proactive.
Oh, for sure.
Why do you think that, these problems typically present themselves at, larger organizations and not the small? And eventually the small become these larger organizations where the innovation does start to get stifled. Are there any examples of, well, you mentioned, SpaceX and Tesla, those are pretty sizable companies, but why do you think it's sort of the standard where, you have a company that comes onto the scene, they are really innovative, they grow super quickly, and then there's eventually a plateau that they run into, or a wall that they run into?
So I've got a nice answer, and I've got a harsh answer. Nice answer is, there's a lot of red tape. People become, again, risk averse. They don't want to rock the boat.
Mm-hmm.
So they're happy kind of with having a job and just maintaining, versus like you're in a startup, you have to innovate and you have to keep going. And if you make mistakes, you have to, who cares? Just keep moving forward. That's the mentality. But with corporations, it's like, I've done consulting work with big Fortune, 10 companies to startups. And so I see the difference in the mindset there where, if let's say for one big company, an e-commerce company I work for, moving a button from down at the bottom of the page to the top of the page, it took me a month to try to like justify why we should do that. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, but I've heard from other big companies where they're sitting there and allowing their user experience team to do 100 different tests. I think it's like booking.com. One of my colleagues, they actually talked with them and they said, how many tests do you run a month? And they said hundreds. They're just throwing out tests, A/B tests constantly. Mm-hmm. And that's what you have to do. Don't be afraid to just test it with a small group, see how it performs, and then launch it if it works. If it doesn't, then great. It's not a big effect, but just making a small change when your bottom line, 2-3% increase in conversion up or down could be, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. They're so afraid to make that change. Right. So I think that's why you see corporations that are, they stagnate. My main answer is the Peter principle. People are promoted to the point of incompetence. And I see that so often where you get somebody in there and they kind of know what they're doing, but they really don't. And there's a lot of ego involved. And when it comes to corporations, I think there's an inverse relationship between ego and skill set. And, and so there's a lot of big ego. So having them, understand like, shit, we don't know what we're doing. Let's try to figure this out with, either you bring in an expert to like, just teach us to fish, or you just learn it yourself, which is ripe with, risk and cost. So,
well, I think the best experts are those that actually don't even necessarily look at themselves as experts. They're constantly learning and continuing to reinvent themselves as well, especially in today's day and age where everything is so fast paced, it changes so quickly. It's, if you had 15 years of email marketing experience, but you weren't constantly out there, looking at what's new, learning the new platforms, learning the new tricks of the trade, so to speak, you could not be less relevant or capable in this particular moment, resting on your laurels. That's pretty much not a thing anymore with how quickly things change.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm constantly trying to learn and try to keep my team up to date on what the latest processes are, the tools are. Human interaction and psychology stay somewhat the same, but it still changes because as device changes, people's interactions change. There's definitely a dynamic aspect to it that you need to keep up with. But when it comes to like being more efficient with the tooling, with the teams, and just the human interaction with our clients is always the biggest challenge. And it's not the product itself, it's actually the people that we have to deal with. And so just that psychology, it seems to be similar between company and company. You just know, okay, this is category A, this is the immaturity level, so this is how you deal with them. It's category B. So it's always a fun challenge to see these different companies at different stages.
One of my questions for you was going to be, what were some of the, or what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've encountered, starting and running your own business,
for sure,
that you weren't necessarily expecting?
I've always tried to like learn how people, I guess, manage their team or their clients. And I can't remember where I saw it from, but somebody said, I put my team first and the client second. And I tend to have followed that for a long time. And people on my team have been with me. I've had people with me for a couple of decades now. but most people have stuck with me for a while, several years. And I think that's a testament to, if you put your team first and you really defend them, you really try to support them, they'll just automatically do that with the client. And that seems to be where, our client engagements are not just like a few months, it's multiple year engagements. So I think that's a good testament to show that's probably a good approach, versus a client's always right. Whatever they say, you just, you do everything they ask for. I mean, that's not the case, because they're not always right.
No.
Sorry to say.
and that's where the relationship really starts to falter, as soon as the respect is lost and you just become essentially a task rabbit for whatever they want, then why are they paying you for strategy and for your expert advice when you've just been basically, pushed down into being an executor of whatever they, bring across the table.
Exactly. I think they, the challenge is to, we have different personalities who we deal with, and different personalities on our team. And, I tend to always try to be direct with the leadership that I'm involved with. And I think they respect that. I try not to sugarcoat, like, look, you can do this one thing. Maybe somebody likes to do that, but what you want in the long run is not this or that. And, I try to be, honest about what we say and not just sugarcoat shit. So I think that they, respect that. And they know that I'm not just in there just trying to make a quick buck. I'm actually trying to, take ownership of what we're trying to recommend. And if we make a mistake, we own up to it and we say, hey, let's pivot and figure something else out.
Yeah.
So
no, that makes a lot of sense. And all the biggest issues we ever had with the agency was always the client and team member relationship. But I think, I never really thought about it in your way of, always put the team first and the client second. But looking back, when we fired our first client ever, that should have been fired, probably like a month or two earlier than they actually got fired. Sort of the team morale and just everything probably 2x overnight, because I just sort of put my foot down and said, we're done doing this. We're done, being sort of the scapegoat for X, Y, and Z things. And, the team got brought so much closer together as a byproduct of that. And then we got to work and focus and spend more time on the people that we should have been spending more time with.
Yeah. And that just comes with maturity, because when you're first starting out, building a business, you just want to get as many clients as you can. You want to just appease them as much as possible. And it's just, I get that. I mean, you're starting off, it's hard to be confident and say, you know what, I don't need you. And, you have one other client. It's hard to be that confident to say that. So I get that. And I think, again, because when I do focus on the team, there's definitely a tendency to, I have to watch out, because I've had team members where they took advantage of that. And so, and again, I can't remember where I heard this from, but they said, what is the most detrimental person on your team? Is it that person who knows everything but doesn't give a shit, or somebody who doesn't quite know a lot, but they really care? And so you actually take the second one, you prefer that second one, because that first one, who's got that ego and who doesn't really care, can be that can be a virus within your company. And I've had that before, and that can bring, one bad person can bring down your company if you don't be careful.
And I think it's harder to identify in a remote environment than in person. You're just not engaging and interacting as much or as frequently. And, it's easier to hide online than it is in person. So
yeah, for sure.
Which is one of the blessings and also curses of this new remote work world. There's a lot of benefits to it, but there's definitely some cons as well.
Yeah. I always tell my team that we have to over communicate. Just, whether it's constant meetings, it's fine, but just make them short and sweet, and just show yourself, let's talk, and, have those conversations. But I always tend to try to talk with my team one-on-one anyway, just to see how they're doing and just get that human aspect. Again, I'm a user experience designer, so I have to have empathy. So hopefully that's one of my strong suits, that I can read people better.
When it comes to the way that you think about building your team, what's more important for you, hard skills or soft skills, or is it some combination of both?
So that's a very interesting question, because if you asked me 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it'd probably be different. You know, because we're a consulting agency, there's definitely a certain level of hard skills that has to be present, and you have to be good at. But it's the soft skills that show your success rate in the long run. Hard skills are great in the short term, but not in the long run. You know, I've got people who are very competent in what they do, but there's frustrating things that they would do that would just eat at the team, eat at the client, eat at my time. And that just builds and builds. And unless they change that, again, that's a virus too, that can grow within your team. And so I think when you're interviewing people, attitude is such a big key. It's like, you can ask them the hard skills, but if their attitude is garbage, or you can sense some type of chip on their shoulder or ego, that's going to manifest itself at some point. So you've got to be aware of that.
To your point about ego and chip on the shoulder, why do you think then that some of the more successful founders over the past decade, some of them definitely have, that chip on their shoulder? Do you think, in some cases it actually can be a good thing as long as it's, in the right direction and channeled the right way?
Yeah. Use that power for good and not evil type of thing. I think if you're driven, it's one thing, but us as designers, we're going to present things that a client may not like, or they have their own subjective view on things. We try to back whatever we do with data. So it's not this checkout works better, it's just more conversion rate, whatever. This is why you should do it, versus I think I like this button over here better than over there, just because I think it's better. And so if you got somebody with a chip on their shoulder, they're going to take that feedback with clients who don't know exactly what they're doing or why they're making that decision. They're going to take it harder. And so they're going to get upset. They're going to get demotivated. And so I've seen that happen, where certain people on my team will just be so frustrated because they can't get across. I'm like, well, that's your job to sell it. If you can't sell it, then don't get so frustrated and don't get so attached to something. So I think that's where, if you've got a founder who has a chip on their shoulder but they're driven to if it's a product that they know that they want that success, and they're just driven to make sure it's successful, use it for the right causes. But if your customers are saying, hey, this sucks, then you have to understand, you're not the end all be all. And that's a problem with sometimes where we've gone to companies where the leader is not really present, but then he or she will come in at the last minute, throw a monkey wrench, because they just feel like, hey, I'm going to just blow this all up. I'm like, well, where were you 2 days ago or a week ago? You can't do that. And just because that's how you feel. Yeah. So I think, again, you have to, as consultants, we have to wrangle in those cats, as we used to say, to make sure that, it's used, whatever motivation they have is used to an advantage.
Yeah. Ego, not a good thing. Chip on the shoulder, might be, as long as it manifests itself in motivation.
Exactly.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights. And I'll definitely include it in the show notes. But before we hop, can you let everybody know where they can find and connect with you online if they want to learn more?
Definitely. You could check out we actually started our own podcast. It's Make an Impact YT for YouTube. You can check it out there. Talk about the latest AI to UX to product strategy. Or you can check out our website at impact with 3 I's, IIIMPACT.io.
Awesome. Well, again, I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you. For everybody that's listening, as always, you can find me at brandonamoroso.com or scalus.ai. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.